Aurora Bell stood on the polished marble floor of the downtown wine boutique, L'Elegance, taking a hesitant breath as the soft murmur of well-dressed patrons floated around her. She clutched a basic tote bag tightly in her hand, feeling painfully aware of the thrifted coat she wore and the worn shoes that had carried her through the day's work at the grocery store. Months of saving, of skipped lunches and extra shifts, had led her here, the night she'd booked for an exclusive wine tasting event, a small reward the doctor had recommended after she recovered from her recent illness. The boutique glowed under crystal chandeliers, and cold light shone from rows of rare wines lined up on shiny wooden shelves. Aurora tried to steady her nerves, but as she reached the counter, her practiced words stumbled. "I'm here for the wine tasting, with the sommelier?" Her voice faltered on the word, the unfamiliar term tripping her tongue. Damien, the sommelier, a sharply dressed man with a cynical smile, looked over his glasses and smirked. "You mean sommelier," he corrected, voice thick with condescension. "And what is your name?" "Aurora Bell," she replied, showing her reservation carefully saved on her phone. Damien's smirk deepened into a sneer. "Well, Aurora, this event isn't for bargain shoppers. Perhaps you're better suited for a less refined establishment." Whispers and laughter flickered through the crowd. Aurora's cheeks flushed red, the warmth crawling painfully up her neck. The delicate crystal glasses, the hushed conversations filled with jargon she barely understood, all of it suddenly felt like a secret club she would never belong to. Heart pounding, she felt exposed, humiliated before the sharp eyes and judgmental gazes that cut like knives. Her dream, this one night, felt suddenly far away, a place she was no longer welcome. Aurora stepped back from the counter, the sting of Damien's words still sharp in her ears. Around her, the guests exchanged amused glances, a few chuckled quietly, clearly siding with the sommelier's cutting remarks. Others turned their faces away, pretending not to have witnessed the unfolding scene, their discomfort evident but silent. A low murmur of whispered conversations rippled through the dimly lit room, punctuated only by the occasional clink of delicate crystal. No one stepped forward to offer her a word of kindness or defense. Her heart pounded heavily in her chest, a dull ache spreading behind her ribcage. The confident stride she had mustered when walking through the boutique's gleaming doors had evaporated. Instead, her steps became hesitant, small, as if the marble floor itself had grown treacherous beneath her feet. Aurora's fingers tightened around the strap of her tote bag, the fabric rough against her palm, anchoring her to the moment even as the edges threatened to blur with tears. She barely noticed the curious glances following her retreat. Outside, the cool night air hit her suddenly, sharp against her damp cheeks. Aurora slipped onto a cold stone bench nestled under a flickering street lamp just beyond the boutique's grand entrance. The glow from the warm interior spilled over the sidewalk, contrasting with the shadowed quiet of the street behind her. She clutched her tote bag closer and bowed her head, fighting to hold the press of tears at bay. The weight of humiliation settled in her chest like a heavy stone. Memories she had carefully tucked away surged forward, tumbling through her mind in vivid, aching flashes. She remembered the endless shifts at the grocery store, mornings when she'd force herself out of bed long before dawn, stocking shelves and tallying receipts while her exhausted feet bore the weight of the day. How she'd skipped lunches more times than she could count, often eating a hasty sandwich from home or nothing at all, saving every penny she could spare. Aurora recalled the nights she'd counted change left in her purse, promising herself that the coins she tucked away would one day buy something worth remembering. Her thoughts drifted to the small joys she had surrendered: birthday cakes without candles, afternoon strolls trimmed short, invitations declined because she couldn't afford a taxi ride home. Each sacrifice had been made with this night in mind, a dream crystallized from whispers she'd overheard at the store or snatches of conversations about rare vintages she barely understood. The wine tasting wasn't just a luxury. It was a promise to herself, a brief escape, a celebration of resilience after the illness that had sapped her appetite and dimmed her spirit. Aurora had heard her doctor suggest wine as a gentle way to coax back not just her taste buds but a hint of joy. So she had set her heart on this event, months of diligent saving infused with hope and trembling anticipation. She had practiced asking for the reservation once aloud, the sommelier, please, only to stumble over the word now so cruelly corrected. She thought of the afternoons when she passed by the boutique's glittering windows, pressing her palm against the cool glass, imagining the refined conversations and the swirling glasses filled with ruby reds and golden hues. But tonight, all that hope had shattered. Damien's sneer wasn't just an insult to her appearance or her humble life, it was a rejection of everything she had strived for, a sharp wedge driven between her and the world she longed to inhabit, even for a fleeting moment. The guests' laughter and silent disapproval had tattooed itself on her skin, a reminder that some places were fenced off by more than just price tags. Yet beneath the ache, a small ember kindled. Aurora's jaw clenched in quiet resolve. Though the pain was raw and the night darker than she'd imagined, she refused to be defined by this scorn. Rising carefully from the bench, she wiped the streaks that tears had left on her cheeks. Her hands trembled but her breathing grew steady. She tucked the memory of the sommelier's words away, not as a mark of defeat but a challenge. The boulevard stretched ahead, wet with the faint sheen of recent rain, reflecting the city lights in shimmering pools. Aurora took a tentative step forward, then another, slowing her pace to steady her thoughts. The distant hum of traffic offered a strange comfort, a reminder that the world outside this boutique carried on, vast and unyielding. As she walked, the events of the evening mixed with memories that underscored her quiet strength. She recalled how the illness had left her weak and withdrawn, how every day demanded more resilience than the last. Her recovery had been slow, marked by small breakthroughs and persistent illness shadows, but tonight was meant to be a celebration, not a reminder. The ache in her chest softened, replaced by a glimmer of pride, for her endurance, for the sacrifices she had made. A dream might have been tarnished, but the core of her resolve remained intact. Aurora's reflection in a store window caught her eye, a simple woman, yes, dressed plainly but with a spark in her gaze that no amount of mockery could dim. The bitterness of rejection faded slightly as she let herself imagine a future where she owned her story rather than letting it own her. Whatever lay ahead, she knew this night would mark a turning point, not for the wine she had been denied, but for the quiet courage that she carried within. Aurora stood for a moment on the rain-slicked sidewalk, the cool night air filling her lungs as she steadied herself. The shadows from the elegant wine boutique behind her seemed to stretch long and daunting, but she refused to allow the bitterness of the evening to take root in her heart. She wiped the last of her tears from her cheeks and squared her shoulders. She owed herself more than being defined by a few cruel words. Tonight hadn't gone as she'd hoped, but she was determined not to let it ruin her. Turning away from the boutique, Aurora pulled out her phone and glanced at the confirmation email once more. The reservation was there, clear and undeniable. No mistake. She scanned the message carefully to ensure she hadn't misread anything. The payment was processed weeks ago, and every detail matched her name and requested date. The injustice of being turned away lingered persistently at the back of her mind, but in this quiet moment, she resolved to address it calmly and clearly. Opening a social media app, Aurora composed a post. She wrote steadily, choosing her words with care. She explained the humiliation she had faced at the hands of the sommelier, Damien, who dismissed her because of her appearance and background. She described the venue's exclusive setting, her excitement for the event, and how deeply she had saved to participate. Aurora spoke not in anger but with quiet dignity, hoping to shed light on the experience with honesty and firmness. Before posting, she tagged the boutique's official page. Satisfied, she pressed send. Pocketing her phone, Aurora began walking down the side street adjacent to the boutique, her mind busy but calmer. As she passed a service entrance marked, "Emergency Exit," her eyes caught something not quite right. The small metal door was chained and padlocked, with a faded sign warning that it must remain unobstructed in case of fire. Nearby, a couple of workers in uniform leaned against a wall, talking quietly. Aurora overheard one mutter, "They never check this door. Boss says it's too much hassle." Another replied with a chuckle, "Yep. If there was a fire, no one get out through here. Cost cutting all the way." The words, a casual disregard for safety, knotted her stomach. She pulled out her phone again and snapped a quick photo of the locked door and the faded sign. It struck her that this was more than a personal slight, it was a risk to every customer's safety. Determined, she made a note to report this to the local safety regulators. The evening's humiliation was not the only concern she would face. Continuing on her way, Aurora's thoughts turned back toward the boutique's wine offerings. The menu had been confusing, with prices that shifted unexpectedly between bottle and glass. Earlier, as she lingered near the entrance before the confrontation, she'd caught a snippet of conversation between staff. One employee, whispering hurriedly, admitted to another that some wines touted as rare imports were actually common vintages relabeled with fancier tags to justify the hefty prices. The knowledge stung. Customers like her, unfamiliar with the finer points of wine, were being misled and overcharged for products that did not match their premium labels. Aurora knew this wasn't just unethical, it was deceitful. With a sudden clarity, she opened her email app and drafted a message to a respected food and beverage journalist she had seen in a local magazine. She explained what she had witnessed, the mislabeling, the locked emergency exit, and, of course, her experience with the sommelier's humiliating rejection. She attached the photo of the emergency exit and described the deceptive pricing she had overheard. Writing the email gave Aurora a sense of purpose and control. Instead of retreating and feeling defeated, she was choosing to act with quiet integrity. Her message was brief but thorough, a factual account free from bitterness but firm in its resolve to seek accountability, not just for herself but for all patrons who deserved honesty and safety. By the time she hit send, the night air had cooled her burning cheeks and steadied her resolve. Aurora glanced back once toward the boutique's softly glowing windows. Though it had denied her that night, she realized she still had a voice, and she could use it. She slowed her pace, feeling the rhythm of her footsteps match her steadying heartbeat. The city around her hummed with life, distant sirens, hurried late-night conversations, and the occasional screech of tires on wet pavement. The world moved forward, indifferent yet full of possibility. Aurora joined in that flow, walking with quiet strength beneath the streetlights. Meeting disappointment head-on was unfamiliar terrain, but with each step, she claimed a small victory. What had started as an evening of hurt had transformed into something else, a chance to shine a light on unfairness, to advocate for change quietly but effectively. Aurora understood that courage was not always loud or fiery. Sometimes it was simply keeping one's footing when the ground beneath seemed unsteady. As she made her way home, thoughts of the night replayed and reshaped. The humiliating encounter with Damien still stung, but now it was part of a broader picture, one of accountability and hope. She reminded herself that rejection by one door didn't close off the entire world. There were other ways to be heard, other paths to claim dignity. By the time Aurora reached the familiar safety of her modest apartment, exhaustion wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She prepared a cup of tea, the warmth steadying her trembling hands, and sat quietly by the window. Outside, the city lights twinkled through a light drizzle, and she allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply, embracing the quiet dignity that had grown from the night's trials. Aurora Bell had come seeking a dream but found something else, a quiet strength and determination that promised she would not be silenced or made invisible. She was ready to face what came next. Aurora's social media post surfaced late that night, quiet and composed in tone but strikingly clear in its message. She described her experience at the wine boutique, and the cold dismissal she faced from Damien, the sommelier who mocked her after failing to recognize the legitimacy of her prepaid reservation. In her words, there was no anger, only the raw truth of exclusion, a plea for respect. She tagged the boutique's official account, and within hours, the post began to catch attention. By morning, the post had been shared dozens of times, rippling quickly through local online communities. Many expressed admiration for Aurora's courage to speak out with such calm dignity. Comments poured in, supportive messages from strangers applauded her patience, others shared their own moments of feeling out of place in elite settings where class and appearance seemed more important than character. Food bloggers and local influencers picked up the story next, using their platforms to amplify the conversation. One prominent lifestyle blogger, a strong voice known for calling out unfair treatment, wrote a candid piece highlighting how often those in the service industry, and customers with modest means, were dismissed or humiliated by businesses obsessed with exclusivity. The wine boutique's name appeared repeatedly alongside hashtags demanding fairness and inclusivity. As public pressure mounted, the boutique initially issued a carefully worded apology on its social media channels. The statement expressed regret for any discomfort customers might have experienced but tried to minimize Damien's behavior, calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding and emphasizing their commitment to customer satisfaction. The tone betrayed a reluctance to accept full responsibility. Fueled by public outcry, local safety authorities paid closer attention to the boutique. Their scheduled inspections, prompted by Aurora's report of the locked emergency exit, uncovered multiple safety violations. Inspectors found the fire exits sealed with a heavy padlock and no clear signage indicating evacuation routes. Further investigation revealed inconsistent labeling on several wine bottles, confirming suspicions raised by Aurora's overheard staff conversations about misrepresented vintages. These violations were serious enough to warrant fines and a temporary suspension of the boutique's operating license. Media outlets heralded the findings, reinforcing the growing narrative of a business more focused on preserving an image of exclusivity than on safety and honesty. During interviews, Aurora held firm, refusing to be drawn into sensationalism. Her measured words spoke to a larger issue, the need for respect and fairness toward all customers, regardless of their background or means. The boutique's management faced mounting internal scrutiny. Damien, publicly identified as the sommelier who had humiliated Aurora in front of patrons, was suspended pending review. Employees who had witnessed his behavior or been privy to concerns about safety and mislabeling came forward anonymously, supporting the growing case for reform. After a brief internal investigation, the decision was made to terminate Damien's employment. The news spread rapidly, satisfying many who had called for accountability. Meanwhile, Aurora was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from her community and beyond. Messages flowed in, from neighbors who admired her bravery to complete strangers inspired by her quiet dignity and determination. Many shared their own stories of exclusion from spaces that seemed reserved for a privileged few, finding in Aurora's story a spark that encouraged them to speak up as well. Local consumer rights groups invited Aurora to participate in discussions about customer treatment and equitable service in luxury settings. Her voice became a symbol not only of resilience but of meaningful change. More than a singular incident, her experience sparked a broader conversation about class bias, elitism, and the often invisible barriers faced by those who lack the outward markers of affluence. The boutique itself, under pressure from regulators and public opinion, announced a series of reforms designed to rebalance their approach to customer service. New policies promoting inclusivity, transparency in pricing and labeling, and rigorous safety protocols were publicized. The company pledged training for staff aimed at empathy and professionalism, part of an effort to repair its reputation. Letters and messages of thanks began to arrive for Aurora, their warmth a balm after the harsh sting of earlier humiliation. As she absorbed the depth of support, Aurora recognized that this was about more than personal vindication. It was about justice for anyone marginalized or dismissed simply for where they came from or how they looked. The experience empowered her, transforming the bruising rejection into a platform for advocacy that transcended the evening's events. Though the scars of hurt remained faintly etched, Aurora's spirit had grown stronger, nourished by a community that valued her courage. The simple store clerk who once hesitated before the polished doors of a wine boutique now stood quietly at the center of a movement demanding fairness, dignity, and respect. This journey was far from over, but Aurora was no longer walking it alone. Weeks had passed since the night that had changed everything for Aurora Bell. She returned to her familiar rhythm, arriving early at the grocery store where she worked, donning her clean but simple uniform, greeting customers with her usual warm smile. The modest surroundings and steady routines offered comfort, a grounded sense of normalcy after the storm that had unsettled her world. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet confidence now stirred. Gone was the hesitance that had shadowed her in the days following the ill-fated wine tasting. Though her thrifted clothes and well-worn tote remained the same, Aurora walked with a newfound grace, her steps purposeful rather than tentative. The weight of public support and the impact of her actions infused her with calm strength. Colleagues noticed the subtle change, the way she met challenges without faltering, how her voice carried a steadiness that inspired quiet respect. One afternoon, as the golden light softened through the store's windows, Aurora's phone buzzed on the break room table. She glanced at the screen to see a message from a local consumer rights organization. They thanked her sincerely for her courage in standing up for fair treatment and invited her to speak at an upcoming event dedicated to promoting inclusivity and respect in customer service across industries. The invitation felt like an honor, affirming the ripple effect of her quiet stand. Days later, she received another message, this time a letter from a government agency overseeing public health and safety. It expressed gratitude for her report that led to vital inspections and reinforced the importance of citizens' vigilance in ensuring safe environments. Reading it, Aurora allowed herself a soft smile. Her voice had mattered far beyond what she imagined. The wine boutique's public apology letter arrived in the mail shortly afterward. It was polished and carefully worded, expressing regret for the distress caused but stopping short of any personal acknowledgement. Aurora read it thoughtfully, then folded it away. The letter held less weight than the changes sparked by her actions, the reforms posted online, the new management promises displayed on the boutique's website, and the genuine community support that now surrounded her. She chose to regard the apology as a gesture, not a closure, and focused on the future ahead. Weeks later, on a bright spring afternoon, Aurora found herself walking past the boutique once more. The storefront had been refreshed, the windows displaying a crisp new sign announcing new ownership and customer-friendly policies designed to foster inclusivity and transparency. Inside, soft jazz music floated through the open doors, inviting patrons to experience the renewed space. For a moment, Aurora paused, her reflection mingling with the scene, a simple woman, once excluded, now silent witness to change inspired by her courage. That evening, back in the warmth of her cozy apartment, Aurora gathered with friends around a small kitchen table. Steam rose from well-used teacups as laughter blossomed and stories wove through the air. It was a scene filled with comfort, connection, and quiet celebration, not grandiose, but deeply meaningful. Aurora's eyes sparkled with a calm pride as she shared pieces of her story, not for attention but as a testament to resilience. She spoke of the night she had longed so deeply for, how rejection had opened unexpected doors, and how standing up with grace had made all the difference. The room filled with warmth, a hushed appreciation for the journey she had traveled, from modest clerk to a quiet advocate shaping change. Though she carried no titles and bore no lavish adornments, Aurora's simple strength radiated unmistakably. Her courage, her willingness to raise a voice where others might remain silent, was proof that dignity and resolve come from within, transcending circumstance. In the glow of soft lamplight and shared stories, Aurora looked around at the friends who had stood by her and smiled. She was home, rooted in community, emboldened by experience, and radiant in her renewed dignity. The night that had once threatened to diminish her had instead affirmed that courage, no matter how quietly expressed, held the power to transform lives. Aurora Bell had no grand status, no glittering reputation. But she had something far more enduring, a fierce heart that refused to be silenced and a spirit that gave voice to fairness, kindness, and respect. And for her, that was more than enough.